Hello, I'm Ashley Leitner with DACRA Process Safety. I'm here today with Mike Snyder, who leads DACRA's organizational risk management practice, and Angelica Grindle, who is a behavior analyst and human performance expert. An area of interest for EHS operations and safety leaders has been high reliability organizations. So you guys have been working on a variety of innovations in that space. Could you share more?
Sure. So at the heart of every environmental health and safety program, there are three elements that are going to be needed for that program to be successful and to deliver world-class results. Number one, we have to identify hazards and assess the risk of the activities that are going on. Number two, with those risks, we need to design and implement controls. And then number three, we have to continually evaluate how well those controls are operating and how effective they are. So the first two elements tend to have a lot of technical environmental health safety and process safety aspects. And we do a lot of work in risk calibration, scientific data acquisition and analysis, and then trying to compile that in a way that helps leaders have a good view of their risk. Secondly, we do a lot of work in providing model programs that can be used to manage that risk through controls. And through that, we bring it a lot of times to the table our view on HOP and brain-centric reliability, because we want to make sure that those controls function even if human error aspects and risk factors arise. The third part is actually the secret sauce that makes organizations and move from good to great. And that is the aspect of an organization being able to decipher the weak signals, signs, and symptoms of problems with their control system. And so I'll turn it over to Angelica to talk about our leadership attributes in building capability in that space.
All right, thank you, Mike. We can design really great systems and processes and procedures, but it doesn't necessarily mean that people will use them in the way that we want. And when you're thinking about any kind of performance change, it's really important to take it back and go, okay, what are those behaviors that we want to see people doing? A critical one in the space that Mike's talking about is that ability to recognize weak signals that indicate something's off here, and also to then act appropriately upon whatever that information is. And so now we're talking about human performance. What are people doing on a day-to-day basis? So it becomes really critical that leaders are creating an environment where people feel comfortable, where they have that psychological safety to feel comfortable to say, hey, you know what, I'm worried about X, and raise that red flag, identify and shout out for the world those weak signals, and then leaders acting appropriately.
And I would say that as I've gotten involved in investigating catastrophic incidents, in every single one of those events, there have been dozens, and in one case more than 100, early warning signs and signals that, had the culture of the organization allowed people to raise those issues and leaders stepping up to their responsibility to resolve those issues, the significance of that event would have been greatly reduced, if not the event not happening at all. And so this is an area where we have tremendous ability to impact the outcomes and the safety of our colleagues and workers in this space through the cultural and leadership intervention.
Yeah, it's really common when there's some kind of incident and then they do that investigation. Most of the time, there were all sorts of signals indicating that there was a problem, that something was off here. And then there's silence, nothing was done about it. And then, of course, then something happens and everyone's acting like it's the first time, where no, you had a lot of early warning signs that you could have addressed. And so what we want to make sure is that when we're doing risk categorization and developing your risk registry and all of that, that we're also looking at the human side of it and asking ourselves, is our culture set up to be able to act appropriately?
Thank you so much for that. So another thing, a topic that's very interesting for leaders now is risk-based decision making. So could you cover a little bit more of some of the innovations and subject matter that you guys have been tackling?
So I'll start. And right now, many of the exposures in the workplace that arise, not all of them rise to the same level of seriousness. And so at the end of the day, in a world of limited resources, we have to be able to focus our activities on those things that present the highest risk to our employees and to our company. And so we have to be disciplined in that process because we can't do all things. We have to really focus our attention on the things that matter. So risk-based decision making is simply trying to get the right attention and the right resourcing focused on activities that present the highest risk. Now, the disciplined approach to that is that we need to inventory the risk. We need to ensure that the controls that are made for the risk are appropriately designed. And then, as we've talked, there are cultural and human performance reliability aspects because it's not all about technology. These risks have a technical component, but they also have an organizational component. And then you put that all together, we need to be able to measure, to govern how well those risks are being managed, and if necessary, make course corrections. In each one of those steps, we have experts within DECRA, whether it's a technical solution, a human performance reliability solution, a cultural or leadership development solution, and a metricing and technology solution that can be brought to the specific needs of a client, the specific risks and hazards that they're trying to manage, to give them the tools to achieve excellence in managing those risks.
Let's look at those words, risk-based decision making. What we want are people to make decisions on what they do in their job in a moment-to-moment basis based on risk. So there's 3 different levels, what we can generally say. First is, what are frontline employees doing? So I'm doing my job, let's say I'm welding, and I have a decision to make of how I'm going to perform my job, and what are those things that I'm going to take in that'll trigger to me, that'll signal to me, hey, exposure has changed here, and we need to do something differently. So not only do I need training to understand what are those risks, but then I need to know what I need to do differently. I also need to be in a space where it feels comfortable to speak out, where it feels comfortable to stop the work. And that brings us to supervisors, right? They need to be armed as well. So not only do they need to take care of that cultural component to make sure the people reporting to them feel comfortable to speak out, but they also need to know, okay, in the work that we're going to be doing today, what are those tasks or activities that are going to present the most risk to us? How can I use the information and make my decisions on what I talk about in my toolbox talk? When I'm going out in the field and I'm observing people working, what activities do I want to make sure that I hit to make sure that those critical controls are in place? And then getting outside the floor, as more senior leaders, they need to really have information about where to put resources. What is their strategy going to be for the coming year? So making sure that they have that kind of information that's focused not only on those lagging metrics, but also what are those leading metrics that would indicate something might be a little off. Mike, can you talk a little bit about some of the leading metrics that are helpful in this space?
So let me start with just a leadership philosophy. When we engage with clients on risk-based decision making, one of the things and one of the early steps is to transition the conversation from concepts like it can't happen here to it is rare and unlikely that it will happen, but how could it happen here and what are we doing about it? As simple as that seems, that starts to unlock a significant amount of, first of all, risk awareness, but also a venue and a forum by which information can be transitioned and shared where there are concerns, where there might be close call, early warning signs, symptoms, and signals that can be acted upon by leadership. What we also find as part of our governance portfolio is we need to be thinking differently about how we track and identify emerging risks and what we consider success. And I think for many years, we've always been talking about leading metrics are important, and I absolutely agree with that. But we have to be looking for things that give us true insight into the nature of risk. And I'll just give you a quick example. Most every firm tracks preventative maintenance tasks done on time. And it's a very, very good metric, but it is so narrow and so really difficult to say, what does it really tell me about my risk other than we're completing the activity of preventative maintenance? What we find is if you can take that metric and look at it in what elements of my critical equipment are not passing their maintenance inspections the first time that they're analyzed. That gives you powerful insight and the opportunity to dig deeper to maybe what that early warning sign provides. And the thing about this is that technology systems today unleash the power to analyze that without a lot of additional work. And so we have to continue to look at technology solutions and harness how they can help us take a deeper look into risk. And there are many elements in the aspects of high reliability that you can walk through that are very similar to that preventative maintenance metric.
Yeah, it's so important that we have actionable information. So looking at just, hey, how many events did we have? Not really helpful. Meanwhile, finding out, well, wow, you know what, 50% of the time that we did preventative maintenance, the equipment wasn't working as designed. That's a problem, and that's really important, and that's something as an organization I can then get in front of, so that when the time comes that say safety equipment needs to be used, it's actually functioning.
It's an indicator of a significant issue and merits the type of investigative and follow-up activity that we would traditionally put, and I'm going to call them more traditional safety signals or safety deviations. I would just say one other thing that I always find to be interesting and effective is that, for example, in the process safety world, we conduct a lot of studies that are called process hazard analyses or HAZOPs. And that is an in-depth study on the different risks of each piece of our equipment. And in many cases, we finish that activity and we literally either put it on the electronic shelf or the physical shelf and forget about it for the next 5 years. And yet, each time we have an incident, I believe that 80% of the incident investigation is complete by just looking at that hazard study, because you've already thought about how could something go wrong, and now you have to analyze, did we miss some aspect of this? It happens, but it's rare. But more often, we've thought about a control that for some reason didn't work, and that's where we need to study. That's how you drive high reliability, by using that information you've generated and use it to understand why something did not happen the way that you thought it did.
Yeah, governance is so incredibly important, and not just at, say, a plant level, right? So we do a HAZOP study, it goes in my file cabinet, gets dusty, but hey, this organization has 50 plants that do the same thing. We want to make sure those senior leaders have the information to know if there's systemic issues across multiple plants. And that requires not only good ways of just managing your data, but having a governance process and those key metrics in place.
It sounds like these are really, really effective systems to help properly understand your vulnerability as an organization, from the person on the site floor all the way to company leaders. So thank you so much for sharing this insight. If you or your organization are interested in knowing and understanding more about risk-based decision making and how you can incorporate it into your safety initiatives, please contact us at DACRA.